everyone gets no's. Each no just has to make you stronger. If it doesn't make you stronger, you're probably not cut out for startup life.
Hi, Paul. Lovely to meet you, and welcome to the O2.
Thank you.
We're here today as part of our scale-up series that we're pulling together with Enterprise Nation to really learn more and understand the experiences of companies like yourselves who are really fueling UK PLC. So let's kick off with yourself as one of the co-founders of Huggg. Tell us about your story, how you came up with the idea for the business and went from inception to what we have today.
OK, so there's a lot of parts to that, and I'll try and skip out the really boring stuff. So I'll get past that really quick. I used to be a banker. It's a really great breeding ground, but it's incredibly corporate. So one day I had an idea whilst I was in the middle of a particular thing I was working on, and that became what Huggg is today. The process for that was I didn't immediately jump out of that corporate life. I continued to build up something on the side.
Okay.
It never affected the job I was doing. I just did it in the middle of the night, didn't have much sleep. But I built up something on the side, and then eventually it had grown into being really something, and then I was able to step out of corporate life.
Fantastic. And tell us a bit more about what is Huggg?
What is Huggg? So Huggg is something communicated digitally, but there is actually something in the real world. So I'll just describe a use case, for example. Imagine you've got a friend who's at work on the other side of London having a pretty rubbish day. You're able to open up our app and send that person a message which might help that person, but you're also able to tap a little coffee cup emoji and buy them a cup of coffee. So you can send them out of that bad day into a happier place.
And tell me, so as you've gone on the journey from the idea through to actually taking that first brave step to actually stepping out, like you say, of corporate life, what was kind of the trigger, or what compelled you to take that first step?
I had a business idea where I had a growing conviction over time that it was really viable, and I couldn't stop thinking about it.
Okay.
And I actually started acting on it the day I had it, and continued without stopping a little bit every day until it had really turned into something. So one of the things I get asked all the time is, oh, I've got this idea, what shall I do with it? And the reality is that the idea is basically very little. Almost no business is today what the original idea for that business was anyway. You just got to start actually executing on it. The more you execute on it, the more little steps that you start taking towards doing it radically increases the chances of you actually following through on it. And I found that in my own life, as soon as I started to do some things with it, and that was immediate, you then have something that goes from having nothing to lose and therefore you don't start, to having something to lose and therefore you carry on. So one of the pieces of advice I give to people quite frequently is stop talking about your idea, stop keeping it to yourself, and start actually trying to execute on it. And that's just what I did. I just started to do things every day. In the end, it became a business that I had to start. So I then just had this massive pull away from the safety of corporate life and into startup life.
What would you say the key challenges as you've started into, starting up and scaling your business? What are the key challenges that you've faced along that journey?
Some of the main issues that I've found have been, so I'm not a technical founder, but we've built a technical product. So one of the main issues I found was I actually started something in an area I had no domain knowledge in, which is not advisable, but it's just what I chose to do. It was much easier to start something in an area that you're pretty familiar with because you have some sort of secret insight or magic insight that means that you're more likely to achieve something in that area. We've been relatively fortunate so far, but raising money is really hard. But also obsessing about the fact that raising the money is the barrier to everything else is quite hard for a lot of other founders. So what I mean by that is many people think I can't do X, Y, Z next step because I haven't raised any money. But there's almost always something you can do without money or on very low money. And realising that is a very big thing that stops people from thinking there's this artificial barrier.
So don't let that be the barrier.
Don't let it be the barrier. It's almost never the only barrier.
So tell us about your experience of building the team then and making sure you're bringing in the right people to Huggg.
So the big thing I learned about hiring is that it's something to focus a lot of time on because of something that we know as leverage. And leverage is where a person optimizes the amount of time that they spend on the big things rather than dwelling on the small things. So if I spend half an hour doing something that's relatively unimportant, that's not really going to alter the direction of the business. But if I spend half an hour making sure I get the right person, then or making that right next hire, then that's the definition of leverage, because that's a more informed, better decision that's being taken that then sets a course for somebody else to do hundreds of hours running in the right direction. And then there are some kind of practical things that you can do, and there's some practical things that we've been able to do to try and harness the best hires that we possibly can. So one of them is the best people are almost never looking for a job. They're always in some sort of job, very well, I guess they're very well paid and retained and incentivized. So you've got to go looking for them. You've got to find a really good reason why they would want to join you, and you've got to get yourself in front of them. One of the other things that we've done from a kind of practicality standpoint is when we're making hires is to try and focus some time on making some actual structured interviews work. We have sometimes gone with some gut feel, like your gut is your best tool. Everyone's best tool is their gut, never ignore it. But we haven't always done the kind of structured interviewing process that we should have done because of time constraints and other things. And that's usually been an error. And if it hasn't been an error, it's just because we've been lucky.
I'm interested in kind of funding and how you've gone about accessing funding to support the growth that you've seen in the business.
Yes. A starting point is we have angel funding, which is wealthy private individuals investing. You know, generally speaking, it might be a 50K or 100K check. That's a typical angel check early on. And then you're into venture capital, in my case.
Right.
So in the case of Huggg, we went and raised venture capital funding. Venture capital funding is absolutely not for every business at all, and it's almost unobtainable for most businesses because there's a very particular set of criteria that they hold down. But the reality is only about 1 in every 300 businesses that manages to get their funding deck in front of a venture capitalist will actually get funding. So the odds are incredibly low, and there are loads of other ways you can get funding. But just back to that, so we did get venture capital funding, we got angel funding before that. How do you do it? Very practically, you write a funding deck, you write a short one, 3 or 4 pages, and that's your way to try and get in. You write another one which is about 12 pages, and that's your first meeting. And then you'll have another one that's about 20 to 25, maybe 30 pages, which is the stuff that gets asked, and then you create a slide for it. And then the next time around, it looks like you already knew the answer to that question. And that's how your deck ends up being just bigger and better as time goes. The other practical thing you need to do is make a list of all of the investors that you want to hit. Take the ones that you really, really want to get money from and ask them last. And your early ones are they're just your burners. They're just your burners. You screw it up in front of the 10 that you don't want money from so that you can do really well in front of the 10 that you do want money from. But the biggest question that gets asked of me is, how do you even get in front of them in the first place? The way that a venture capitalist or an angel investor typically wants to be approached or expects to be approached is through some warm lead or other. Yeah. And that is somebody else that they respect broadly. It'll probably be another investor, which is an incredibly circular problem because that's still another investor, or it will be a founder that they already back, so they'll always take that deck seriously. But I always tell people Airbnb got 20 VCs turned down Airbnb's first funding round. Almost all of them did it later on at a much more expensive rate. Yeah. And those guys succeeded. They ended up selling cereal to not run out of money at one point. Everyone gets no's. Each no just has to make you stronger. If it doesn't make you stronger, you're probably not cut out for startup life, frankly.